All right. So welcome to week 3 of the Thriving Leadership Challenge. And this is my third attempt at doing this challenge. So, first time I got sick. Next time, thought I was recording and I didn't. So here we go. So it's been a couple weeks since I went over the material. So week 3 is about innovation and play. So we're going to talk about playing the game, failure, and weirdness, which can be seen as authenticity, but when I was making this, I really liked using the word weird. All right. Our first quote. We look for this optimal point where there is a risk. There must be a risk. There must be chance. It mustn't all be predetermined because any game where the result is known is not worth playing. Although I was just thinking my daughter might disagree because she tends to like to fudge the outcomes in most of her games. But what Alan Watts is really referring to here is, I mean, this is why we enjoy gambling as humans. There's that, am I gonna win? That's the anticipation, right? And that creates such a beautiful and fun and exciting experience within us. That if we were to know how your whole life is going to play out, or whatever it is that you're focused on, if you were to know how your career is going to play out, your relationships, any of it, it would feel a little boring, right? So we have to learn how to tolerate risk in order to truly enjoy playing the game. So we humans look for security all the time. And this can be my bias also coming from being a trauma therapist. Obviously, my focus with people was always a foundation of safety and security, because that's what was breached, right? So I wanted to say that mine could be a little biased, my views, because of that. But I do feel it is true that we as humans are looking for security all the time. And our need for security often manifests as a desire to know how everything's going to play out, right? So if I know what's coming next, then I feel safe and secure, right? If I don't know what's coming next, that automatically starts to raise the level of anxiety. So this desire to know takes us out of the moment and into a lot of planning and accounting for all future variables. Now, this isn't always inherently bad. I'm not saying that all planning is bad. However, most of us do it to an extent that brings a strong energy of negativity, fear, and doubt. Usually, we aren't excessively thinking about the future in a positive way, right? Usually, it's about potential negative outcomes. And your brain doesn't know the difference of if you're thinking about something bad happening versus, excuse me, something bad actually happening. So when we spend a lot of time in that mental space, our body will experience the stress reactions as a result of that. So the idea is we must be able to hold some level of risk while simultaneously developing some level of skill. So that's also not to say to just jump into things willy-nilly. Obviously, practice towards whatever we're working on is important. So when you think about this like a video game, when we move up levels in each game, we acquire more skills, right? Those skills that we acquire in each level serve us for future levels. However, we cannot obtain those skills if we attempt to skip levels, like if we're trying to jump to the finish line. So if you're playing a video game and there's multiple levels, usually they all feed on top of each other, right? So the things you learn in level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 serve you in level 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And if we skip some levels, we might not learn a skill, or we might misinformation that was needed, and then you get further along and you're like, oh wait, I don't know how to do that, or I skipped over that, and and you kind of, depending on what it is, you might kind of screw yourself over a little bit. So I point this out as in because we often always want to just jump to the finish line. We want that end game satisfaction. Right. However, there is satisfaction throughout the whole thing, but our mind tends to take us out of that present moment satisfaction and into this future orientation. So the game of life is not a race. We're not trying to get to the finish line as fast as possible, right? If you think about the finish line being death, most of us are actually trying to avoid that, right? As much as possible. But for some reason we act in a way as if we're trying to race ahead to the end. We like the racing games, the shortcuts, faster, the more, the better, and you see that in society, right? Everything that's marketed towards us is faster, better. You get to do less and you can advance easily, right? Those are easy sells because we like that idea for some reason. But I feel like even more so now than ever before, we are experiencing the negatives of moving too fast, right? It ends up just being more and more on your plate. So much innovation has happened, let's say in the past 75 years. Yet we don't have more time. In fact, we say that we feel like we have less time than it feels like for people since 1950. So it's just kind of interesting to look at how the advancements towards faster, skipping ahead, jumping ahead, have actually overall increased our stress in many ways. So to learn how to play the game, we must simply move forward. We can hit different buttons, combinations, learn how to do new moves. We can look at the resources and information that's given. However, we can't just sit there and plan everything because you don't really know what's going to happen until you start moving your character, until you start going along the path that's in front of you, right? And begin to explore and play. So that's how life is as well. I've always enjoyed Heidegger's talks about this, that we were thrust into the world, right? You're thrust in here and you're just like, you just gotta kind of figure out your character thrown into a game, and you kind of you have to learn while you're doing it, right? You don't just plan and then play, you learn on the go. So we must venture forth mostly blindly, not knowing what is about to happen. And the other idea is the more we play one level over and over again, right? In a video game, the chances of you completing a level the first time, depending on how hard it is, might be, a tall order. But if you keep playing it over and over again, you develop skills and mastery of that level, right? And like I said before, and then that serves you going forward. So if you skip a level, you miss that mastery. So I equate this to things that were actually not easy for me are the things that I can actually teach more cohesively and coherently and in a way that people understand because I've spent a lot of time on those things, right? Whereas things in my life that have come easy to me, I haven't needed to spend a lot of time on them. So I actually can't teach those things as well or explain them as well because I never really needed to. So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes the more we struggle at something, the more masterful we get at that thing if we allow ourselves to struggle a little bit. So yeah, so the levels you play frequently are the ones you develop the deepest skill in, not necessarily the ones that you move through fast. There is no innovation and creativity without failure, period. So if you're a leader in your industry, right, you have to be able to take risks and play the game. And you have to be okay with failing. Like I talk about doing levels over and over again, that can be seen as failure, obviously. But if you keep playing, if you stay curious, right, that's how we develop our skills, get better and better. If we fail and give up, that's the sign of not a leader. You cannot be a leader if you give up at the first site of failure or even the 10th or 100th site of failure. You have to get really good at failing. So a few things I wrote down here. Failure is not punishment. So a lot of people avoid failure, or when they get, a whiff of it, they stop and they quit because they see failure as a punishment. And the punishment is seen as a moral issue. So I have on there as well, failure is not a moral issue, right? There are lessons to be learned in failure. Or you could look at it as there is no failure, only lessons. Obviously, I'm using that there is failure in this section, but that can be a whole nother way you can look at it. But all of what I'm saying still rings true, regardless of how you phrase it. I enjoy the process of discovery. So this takes out that heaviness around the word failure. I'm discovering, I'm learning, right? Another one is I'm committed to my purpose, right? You do have goals and you do have missions that you are on, and that needs to be this like highest good in your life. If not, you're not going to be able to tolerate the discomfort of the failure that is required along the way, right? If that big goal isn't big enough for you or meaningful enough for you, then it's really easy to throw it out the window, right? That looks like depression. I'm flexible with how it looks, right? So oftentimes we reach success in ways that we didn't think would be the way. And if your mind labels that as failure, right, we might not keep going, or we won't be curious and find out that, oh, I still am moving towards success, or I still am experiencing success. It's just not looking how I thought it was going to look. So really be open with what things look like, because it's not always going to play out how you want it to. So these questions are similar from prior weeks, I believe, but how is my struggle serving me? And what have I learned from my failures? Okay. Feeling through failure, right? So it's one thing to have this cognitive understanding of failure. It's another thing to actually be able to feel through it emotionally and in your body. So it's helpful to remove negative judgments around failure. And to do this, we can name them. So what are your negative judgments around failure? So in order to like move past this and feel through it, we got to know where we're gonna gumming ourselves up. So something doesn't work out in your favor, and you might be like, well, I'll never be good enough for blah blah blah, you know. So what are those distortions around your judgments? So if you're using phrases like always or never, that's a sign that you're in a distortion. If you're catastrophizing, right, like going down the rabbit hole of disaster scenarios, minimizing, maximizing, so that's minimizing the good, maximizing the bad. So identify what they are, what you're entertaining in your mind, so that you can work on moving past these distortions, because underneath it is pure disappointment of something not going as planned or how you hoped or what you feel that means or says about you, right? So we will always be able to argue. We'll always be able to give logical reasons for our distortions. So trying to explain your way out of them is very difficult because you will choose to not believe the positive. It's very easy to do. So you have to choose to move past those and get into the feelings and body sensations, right? And work through it that way. And that's a lot of the stuff that I do in my group with my clients and in one-on-one sessions. So underneath the disappointment, sadness, there's a need that's trying to get met, right? So the more we understand on an intellectual level, but more importantly, the more we're able to truly feel this and meet ourselves in this deeper place, the easier everything I'm talking about is. And this is the stuff that's necessary to actually implement everything that I've been talking about in this series. So great leaders fail well, right? They tend to be graceful about it. They don't let it stop them. You know, they are okay with taking time to process, right? They recommit and continue their path, you know, whatever that may be, until they reach their goals, right? They're not looking for this one and done scenario, because they're playing. All right, let's get back to the idea of play. You know, if you're playing, you keep doing things over and over again in different ways because you're exploring, you're on an adventure, right? And when things pop up, you're not like, oh no, how could this ever happen? It was not supposed to be that way. But you don't do that when you're playing, because you're playing a game. You're like, oh, okay, interesting, this thing. How do I incorporate this? How do I work with this? What do I do with this, right? This is where, like, if you really struggle with this, like signing up for an improv class might be really fun, right? Where somebody else brings in a sentence or an idea or a prop that you then have to be creative and do something with, right? So if you can do that in a fun, playful way on stage or out in the woods or whatever, you can then also learn how to move that to your job and move that to your relationships, right? And engaging with people and projects that you're working on, right? So we want to bring that playful energy in, because that's how you're going to succeed, right? If you get too stuck in your head, you get in your own way, and more disasters are likely to happen. So it's not one and done. You know, a lot of people do this with dieting. right? I'm just going to diet and then I'm going to lose the weight and then I'm just going to be in shape the rest of my life. That's not how it works, right? Right? You need to develop skills and eat in a way every day that works for you, you know? I mean, you don't just like eat once and you're good to go. Our body needs food every day. There is no one and done. Same with moving our body, exercising. You know, we need sleep every day, right? We don't just like, oh, I had a good sleep. I'm good on sleep. So those things that we have to do every day, we have to see these skills as daily skills. The things that make me different are the things that make me. Winnie the Pooh. So I was always in love with Winnie the Pooh. You know, I liked Winnie the Pooh when I was a kid, but when I was a teenager, I did a lot of reading of Winnie the Pooh again and recognizing Winnie the Pooh as a philosopher. And I went really, really deep into that. And I haven't really talked about that in a long time. So I use that because that might be seen as weird. So I thought, what a great way to showcase some of my weirdness and talk about our authentic self. So people are attracted to our authentic self when we're not wearing a mask, when we just are, right? It's the self that naturally arises. I like to think of authenticity like a flower that naturally blooms. When watered and given sunlight, the shape, color, and expressions can be different, yet there's no judgment. It's not trying to, this one flower is not trying to look like another flower, right? It's just simply blooms into its full expression, whatever it looks like for that flower, right? And humans are that same way if we allow it. And usually perfectionism, trying to change our shape, change our color, do those things, increases our stress, right? It decreases our creativity. It inhibits our ability to love and connect. So all the things that we want, love and connection and creativity and acceptance and ease and peacefulness, right? Those things are more of an, like, we allow those things to happen instead of force those things to happen. Um, yeah. So in evolution, also remember it's the different ones that advance the species forward, right? So allow yourself, give yourself permission to be the abnormality, right? And you're really not going to be that weird, that different. But sometimes we need to reassure ourselves when we're stepping out because that can be really scary for the ego. So go out in the world and engage. Try new things. Let yourself explore something that you've always wanted to explore. Don't let your failures stop you. In fact, let that propel you into learning more about yourself. Allow life to be active, right? So when I was really working on this a few years ago, I signed up for like some adult beginner hip hop class, dance class, you know, and hadn't taken a dance class since I was 8 years old, you know? So about 30 years later, doing that, not knowing I'm doing, I really allowed myself to put myself out there and play and do something that was uncomfortable, right? Um, so you can do something that has nothing to do with your career or your job or a big goal. Sometimes it might be helpful to play with something less serious. So kind of back to the failure idea, so it doesn't feel so heavy. But here are some things to think about. What is something that you would love to put out in the world? You know, what is something that you're currently doing that could be more playful? All right, how can you infuse more of your sense of self, your unique weirdness into whatever it is that you're doing? What are you taking too seriously? So I find that my authentic expression gets hampered, right, when I'm taking things too seriously and when it needs to be a certain way. So my weirdness, my authenticity will come out as I shed that seriousness, as I allow for the playfulness, right? As I take risks and start putting things out into the world. So we're kind of integrating everything I've really talked about here today now. So homework in the group, share your takeaways. And to kind of go over the topics here, what's your relationship like with risk? Right? So in order to take risks, it's helpful to know, how am I in relationship with risk itself? And we can really dive deep into that. How can you be okay with not knowing how it all plays out? So that's obviously essential for taking risks. How can we advance our nervous systems to be able to tolerate that? That's where a lot of the inner work comes in here. What's your relationship like with failure? Again, we are in relationship with everything. So really look at what that energetic give and take looks like. How can we move away from failure, move it away from being a moral or a punitive, right? Because again, that brings a seriousness, that brings a heaviness and fear. Really, it brings a fear to it. And when we're in fear, we cannot take risks. When we're in fear, we cannot tolerate failure. So you're not going to be able to get anywhere if you're in fear. What are unique things that you like about yourself? And how can you showcase those more, right? So I invite you to start being a little more playful, allowing some of those weird things to come out and be seen, and infusing that into your life. And you will notice people respond to you a bit differently. So, all right. That is that for week 3. So I'm glad this worked this time. And I will have the slides in the group as well. Let me know if you have any questions. And obviously, if you want to dive deeper into these topics, I have a variety of programs for working with me. You can just sign up for a single one-on-one or one-on-ones as you desire. I also have a couple group memberships, one of just the membership, one with the membership plus a one-on-one every month. So you get a little bit more individualized attention. And then I have a deeper one-on-one package where we meet 3 sessions a week. And then we also check in on that off week, and we can do that every month for as long as it is an energetic alignment to work together. So if you're curious about any of those, I offer a free consult. We can chat. You can tell me about what it is that you'd like to see different in your life and determine if I would be a good fit for that. So don't hesitate to reach out, comment, message me about that, and we can explore those opportunities. All right, I will stop recording now.